Okay, under welfare economics, sometimes students are asked to calculate total surplus, consumer surplus, producer surplus, and the amount of tax in the market. Remember that whatever happens in the market in terms of interaction between the buyer and the seller, both parties benefit. But there's a third party that also benefits, that's the government. If you remember, we said that in microeconomics, there are three players. These three key players are the household, who form the producers or the sellers, who form the firms, and the government. So there are three players here. So whatever you look at in terms of the cake that goes to the buyer, the seller, and the government, we can put all this together and we call that total surplus. So the definition of total surplus is the overall benefit that goes to society when a purchase decision is made and when actually buyers buy something in the market. So come with me and let's look at exactly how this works out on a graph. So first of all, remember, total surplus comprises consumer surplus plus producer surplus. At this stage, there is no government intervention in the market. So the overall benefit to society is the benefit to consumers and the benefit to producers. Okay? Now, you probably remember from class that what we said about consumer surplus is that it is the area below the demand curve and above the price line. Okay? Consumer surplus is defined as the area below the demand curve but above the price line. In terms of producer surplus, it is the area below the price line but above the supply curve. So those are the two things you have to bear in mind as we work through this analysis. So I'm going to use a little bit of algebra with A, B, C, D up to F to work out what the benefits are to these players in the market. So normally you have a demand curve, and you have a demand curve that slopes downward. You also have a supply curve. Okay, let's assume we have a price line in the middle, and let's say we have a quantity. Let's call this Q1 and let's call this P1. Okay, we can work out the consumer surplus and the producer surplus from here. So remember the definition, or just to have to put a price here and the quantity. Remember the definition, surplus CS is the demand curve and above the price line. So that would normally be this is your consumer surplus. The producer surplus, on the other hand, would be the area below the price line and above the supply curve. So that will be your area here. In effect, the total surplus will be the whole area over here. Okay? That's the way to look at it. Sometimes you might be given a whole graph, which I'm going to put here in a minute. And that graph is going to have some numbers in them, and then you have to decide what numbers form the consumer surplus and what numbers form the producer surplus and what goes to the government. So I'm going to do that. Maybe I can do that from here, which would be much better. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to redraw the graph to show you what exactly I was talking about. So we have still the demand curve and we have our supply curve here. But sometimes you are given this situation like this. Okay, say for example we have A, B, C, D, E, and F. Okay, you can be given something like this. And sometimes you can be given something much wider. There might be some letters here as well. But let's work out, first of all, what the total surplus is before tax. Okay, so there are three things we're going to be looking at. The consumer surplus before tax, the producer surplus before tax, and then the total surplus. After that, we will do another analysis to look at what happens after the government has imposed some tax on this particular market activity. So for this one, if you were asked to indicate what the total surplus is, all you have to do is to put all these numbers here, because that's your total surplus. So our total surplus, TS, will be A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F. You can see that all these letters here, that's what I have repeated here. But then what about the consumer surplus? Consumer surplus would therefore be the area above the price line and below the demand curve. So that would be A plus B plus C. It would be A plus B plus C. And therefore your total surplus, your producer surplus, PS, would be the area below the price line and above the supply curve. So that would in fact be D plus E plus F. Okay, so there you have it. You've got all your letters that denote the benefit to the producer, the benefit to the consumer, and the total of that is what we call the total surplus. In the next video, I'm going to work out what happens when there is a tax on the market, so that you can get a complete picture of what happens between the consumer, the producer, and the government on one hand. Thank you.